Third eye drops are intended for open-minded adults. Now administering third eye drops.
This is a culminatory crescendo of an experience for me right now, and I deeply thank you for joining me in it. It also contains what is without a doubt one of the most amazing, sprawling, epic brain melters of a conversation I have ever been a part of. And that actually does mean something, despite this being episode 1 of the Third Eye Drop Show, because I have partaken in quite a few podcasts with some truly incredible human beings. And I guess that requires starting this thing out with some sort of background and some sort of explanation as to why it's happening in the first place. And I'm going to keep those ramblings brief, or try to, and just say the genesis of the thing that has now become this show, this moment right here, started a few months ago with what I'll call an experience that I had. I don't really know what else to call it, but it was the type of thing that just sort of stains you forever. And I get more into this in the cast, though, to be honest. Android caught me a bit off guard by asking me about it pretty much right away. And it's just hard to talk about. You know, that's why I was off guard, I think. Because how does someone talk about a life-altering brush with what seems to be an all-pervasive, fractal, creative undercurrent at the base of reality without sounding like some sort of self-aggrandizing, delusional loon? I don't know. But it really did happen. And along with that came some realizations. One of them being I could no longer carry on creatively the way I had been without feeling like a fraud. And that also meant the terrifying task of a complete and total refresh on my show. Getting rid of all my listeners, potentially, all my subscribers gone, starting a new website. But there's really no other way to do it if you want to create a pure, fresh vessel for this new intention. And now that that is out of the way, let's get to the meat of this thing. Let's get to the real reason your ear holes are being flooded with my mouth noises. And that is our guest, Android Jones, who also uncoincidentally happens to embody a lot of what this show is going to be all about. And if you're not familiar with Android's work, it's just otherworldly. It's a massive collection of psychedelic masterworks that they're definitely awesome to look at, but they're more than just images. Each one of these things is like a rabbit hole unto itself. You can, and I have, sat there and dissected some of these things pixel by pixel. Even so, Android describes them as, in our podcast, residue of something that he comes into contact with every time he takes up his pen. And as he says in our conversation, quote, "My art is how I meditate, and it has always been how I access the spirit of creation." And that may sound grandiose, but it does not even stop there. As you're going to hear throughout this conversation, Android's aim is more than art. It is a revolution in thought, in action, and purpose, and an awakening to the cultural conditioning that coerces us into thought prisons and mediocrity. And I know this sounds way too lofty for one man, but it feels like what's really driving him and these ideas and his success isn't even really housed within him to begin with. It's something much larger that feels 100% authentic. And I guess in a roundabout way, that also further sheds light on some of the features of what I myself experienced that was a catalyst to this show. So that's what's driving Android. That's what's driving me, hopefully. And that's what I am striving for in this show and in these conversations at the risk of sounding overconfident. All right, we are mere moments away from my mind meld with the wise and talented Android Jones. I just want to tell you guys about a couple of ways you can support this thing. If you head to thirdeyedrops.com, you will see them all. If you dive down the portal of our Amazon link located at thirdeyedrops.com and you do your shopping there, which unfortunately we all must do from time to time, you can give us a small kickback in the process without paying anything extra. It is quite a beautiful and somewhat puzzling, quite frankly, arrangement, because I'm pretty sure Amazon does just fine without giving a kickback to weirdos like me. But hey, let's take advantage, my friends. And if you are feeling particularly altruistic, those were almost words, you can click the support button and contribute to the show via PayPal, Patreon, or a Bitcoin donation. I welcome it all. But most of all, thanks for just melding minds here with me on this thing. I've got some other shows I am super excited to share with you guys. But for now, without further ado, let's get into this beautiful part one conversation with Android. And man, I gotta say, I love part two even more. So jump right into that when you finish this one.
Begin symbiosis.
Android Jones.
Hey, what's up, Michael?
What is up, my brother? Great to see you.
Great to see you too.
How is the fabulous Chiang Mai treating you?
Oh, it's words fail me, but it is utterly meaningful and deep and delightful out here in rural Chiang Mai, Thailand.
So you want to just jump into this thing, or is there any pre-thoughts you have you want to discuss?
Man, I can go in so many different directions. I'm actually kind of more curious on, because I know that we could definitely spiral out into lots of different tangents with so much going on, but this is not Midwest Real anymore. This is for your mind drops.
Third eye drops. Third eye drops. Yeah, man.
Third eye drops. So tell me a little about your third eye drops intentions, and that might help guide us.
Yeah. Well, this is really timely because I've been recording a bunch of interviews that are going to be part of Third Eye Drops, but it's always been my intention to have you be the first guest because I loved our first conversation. I love your art and your audience, so I think kind of birthing Third Eye Drops into the world via a conversation with you is a really ideal situation. But man, the reason I decided, yeah, go ahead.
No, go please. You're answering what I was going to ask.
So the name Midwest Real has always kind of held the show back in a way, I think, because it's just very vague. It doesn't evoke anything. It doesn't, and the show itself is kind of all over the place in terms of the content and the conversations that I have, which is a great thing sometimes, but also limiting, I think, especially when you're, an independent dude just trying to have conversations and hit as many ears with them as you can. And I had kind of a personal transformational experience a couple of months back that just really hit it home in terms of telling me, this is what you need to do. You need to do it. Stop lying to yourself and putting it off and making excuses and getting distracted and doing all these other things, and really put the wheels in motion and do this. Because, I've done enough podcasts. I've done 90 something podcasts, Midwest Real now, to know that it's a fulfilling endeavor. And it's the one thing I kind of have to hold on to in my life that really makes me feel like I'm becoming the thing that I'm meant to be, if that doesn't sound too squishy.
No, not at all.
But yeah, man, I mean, this is really my attempt to do that. I really want to take everything I've learned in that process and multiply that into something else, transmute that into the next evolution of itself, like a Pokemon evolution, you know, like a Pokemon becoming the next level of Pokemon or something. So hopefully that's what this is the start of.
Yeah, no, that's great. I fully support that. I think you have an amazing podcast. You're definitely one of the ones that I reach out on my long flights and drives. And you always have some great and meaningful guests and conversations happening. And it's a shame that you don't have a larger audience for the amount of quality that you put out there. And I think that, I mean, yeah, I remember even when you contacted me first, that the Midwest Reel, like it was, I had to think about it when I figured out like what is Midwest Reel, like what does that mean? And so yeah, branding and marketing are important. So yeah, I commend you for going in that direction.
Thanks, man. Thanks. And it's so weird to hear, you know, when you are just like I said before, I started the show a couple of years back and really had no notoriety of any sort, no contacts of any sort, no gear, nothing, you know, and you just decide you're going to do it. And I am definitely proud of what I was able to accomplish there. And, you know, hundreds of thousands of downloads later, I'm certainly proud of that, but that's not why I'm doing this. It's really a question mark at this point, but I hate talking about myself, man. it's always weird. It's always a weird thing, especially when I'm talking to you and you have so much more interesting shit to say than I do.
Yeah. Well, I am kind of excited to hear a little more about, I think I haven't listened to the last, I think maybe one or two podcasts you gave, but I definitely heard the podcast where you kind of hinted at this gnosis kind of a revelatory experience that you had. And obviously I'm a little curious about that. I don't know if you've gone into that already in some of your shows yet, but.
Well, I think this is as good a time as any. It's always a little bit weird talking about this kind of stuff because, you know, but fuck it, I'll just talk about it. So it was a McKenna-esque heroic dose type experience, and it was the first one that I've ever had on that sort of a level, and it was terrifying and kind of like staring down the edge of a cliff, but it was something that I had wanted to do for a really long time. And, you know, it's one of those situations where you're sitting there looking at the thing before you ingest it and thinking, holy shit, am I really going to do this right now? And then you start trying to make excuses and reasons why not and whatever. And then, you know, for me, I just knew I wasn't going to be satisfied unless I did it. And man, it was, honestly, I can truly say for the first time in any experience that I've had, it is a 100% guarantee that you will have a transformational, life-altering experience. It's not up for debate. You know, I was doing a podcast with Dennis McKenna like 1 or 2 nights ago, and we were talking about you know, those early studies they did with psilocybin where they were seeing, well, maybe this will elicit a mystical experience. And if you've had it, it's like a joke, you know? It's like, of course it will. It's a 100% guarantee that if you ingest enough of this shit, you will have a life-altering experience beyond explanation. So, you know, it wasn't in the Amazon. It wasn't, you know, the stuff of fairy tales, but it was definitely, for me, the most life-altering trip into my subconscious, another dimension, view of another reality, whatever you want to call it, that I've ever had.
Yeah, well, the red pill is certainly a one-way ticket. One of my close friends and kind of favorite medicine people works with Wachuma, and when he gives his when he sits down and kind of talks everybody through it, and gives people kind of the guidelines. Everyone's really curious about like the duration of the experience, and he always likes to like give people fair warning that the effects of this will last forever.
Yep.
Ultimately. Yeah.
Yeah, and
Well, good for you.
Thanks, man. Thanks. And like I said, it really is one of those things that you have to consider. It's there's a quote along the lines of, if you haven't embarked on the path already, don't do it. Because it makes the rest of your life for 99% of people extraordinarily inconvenient. It's not, it's like you're figuring out how to shape your life around something that is totally rejected by society or something, you know?
Yeah, I don't think anybody comes to psychedelics thinking it's going to make their life any easier. that's,
Mm-hmm.
that's that's not one of its tantalizing lures and promises.
So I'm curious, man, for you, you have led a very non-traditional life, and obviously you've been uh, blessed with this talent, or at least the work ethic, to get your art to the level that it's at, which is, wildly successful. Let's be totally honest. But I'm curious, what was the catalyzing moment, if you can point to one for yourself, that really pulled you down the road that you went on? Because you're down a really unconventional road, albeit a very successful one.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. I don't really feel like I really had much of a choice when I look back at all the, there's a thousand little experiences and circumstances and encounters that kind of led me on this path. But I started at such a young age, that I very quickly kind of painted myself into a corner where, by the time I was in first grade and second grade, I had already was kind of like the artist in the class, and it pretty much kind of cemented my identity, and it became a great, survival skill. I wasn't really good at sports or athletics. I was smaller than a lot of the other kids, and I realized that, making art was a great way to make friends, and girls liked it. But even predating that, it was I think it was really just a way. It was probably my first. Really, I think it really boils down to, it was a way that I was able to really like express love between myself, my mom, and my parents, and it was something that it really nurtured me. Obviously, I think I was talking with my girlfriend Martha about this a little while ago. If I have to be really honest about where I am and my level of success, I obviously have to give a little credit and credence to the fact that I've pretty much, being a white male born to a middle class, healthy family in America, I kind of like won the white privilege genetic lottery.
Yeah.
And so I can't pretend like that obviously doesn't have a huge role to play in the opportunities that were afforded to me. Knowing that, I've tried to do the best and be as responsible as I can with the privilege and opportunity I've had to be able to use the skills and experiences to try to create a meaningful impact and enhancement of a greater reality than myself and my immediate surroundings. But as far as like the catalyzing type of events that happened for me, one thing I talk about that was definitely catalyzing was kind of a first big near-death trip at
Wow.
11 years old. I had a massive brain surgery, a big operation
Whoa.
that came from it was they called it a venous anomaly, which was basically kind of a fancy word for a blood clot in the right hemisphere of my brain that that was a major sort of like line of demarcation within my journey, and totally violently and fiercely like pulled any kind of veil or illusions of immortality at 11, and created like a pretty massive schism between the reality that I'd grown accustomed to and had to kind of reemerge into a whole new fundamental worldview that was a lot scarier than it was before. There was kind of no more guarantees, and the world had become a lot more frightening and intimidating. Seeing how close I came towards the edge of death, and I was kind of resurrected by machines and CAT scans, hence the android title that I have. Actually, be more actually a cyborg would probably be more appropriate, but Andy and Android was just kind of a nickname that I was given back then. But after that, after kind of losing faith in humanity and society and all the things that I thought were kind of vested into my fate and destiny, art really became the one place that was really safe for me. The world that I created, like I lost a lot of faith in the outside world, but the world of my imagination became the refuge that I would constantly seek shelter in. And I have piles and piles of these sketchbooks that I collected at that time, and that was my go-to kind of happy place for a long time. And I think it was within that was definitely sort of the kind of the creative cradle that really cemented or took away any other option that this is what I was going to be doing for the rest of my life. And after that, it was just figuring out ways of getting better and doing it more. And then ultimately, when you grow up and you realize we live in a world where you have to pay to live, it was that kind of that excruciating element of having to commodify your creativity into some type of a profession to support the lifestyle of basically just my lifestyle right now is I work, and my measure of success is just being able to afford and buy back as much of my time to invest into the ecstasy of the creative experience.
Wow, man. Wow. That's an amazing answer. That's an amazing answer. And first of all, thanks for sharing that, because that's, obviously deeply personal. And that's kind of strange, man, because I had a very similar experience as a young child. When I was 5, I had a heart surgery. And when you go through something like that, I have a giant scar for the rest of my life on my side and my back from that surgery. And I think, though, the difference between being 11 and being 5 is huge, because my lack of context in life really didn't allow me to understand what I was going through. I didn't really get how big of a deal it was. I saw adults freaking out and being terrified. I saw my parents, having these reactions, and that kind of let me know, this is very serious. But still, as a kid, you trust everybody, you trust that everything's going to be okay. But I think being 11, you're old enough to really understand, this is my life. Yeah.
Yeah. At 11, you have just enough rug underneath you to get pulled out to be and inherently traumatizing for certain. And I think I was fortunate that at the time, everything really happened. It happened really fast. It was like all of a sudden I woke up, had severe headaches, and then it wasn't until I wasn't able to formulate like proper sentences anymore that my parents realized this was something really serious. And it went from like pediatrician to immediately to the Boulder Hospital to a CAT scan to an ambulance to the Children's Hospital to getting my head shaved to a man. I mean, I don't know where I mean, I'm so grateful for exactly where modern medicine was at that time, that we had these amazing tools like CAT scans, but man, some of the processes that I and it's interesting because my memory is like, it's almost become, even as I tell this story, I have to admit that part of it's almost like I can't honestly say that a lot of the story isn't kind of a mythological fabrication at this point of what is really real and what I do remember. Because even when you have people cutting a cube of skull out of your head and exposing light to your brain, there's, you realize that as modern as our medicine is, there's a lot about the brain that we do not understand, what kind of ramifications these sort of intrusions have into the rest of our lives. But yeah, I mean, there were some, the experiences, the pre-surgery events leading up to the pre-surgery were, when I listen to like Art Bell or these different shows talking about alien abductions, it was as close to like an alien abduction as I could imagine.
Wow.
Like getting dye, like just catheters and dye injected into your brain for the CAT scans. I mean, trying to explain to an 11-year-old why they're sticking a tube into your penis to inject a dye that has to go circumnavigate like your heart and go into your brain.
Oh my
like
God.
that's sorry to get graphic on
No,
you,
man,
but
no, it's
you definitely
it's real, man. It's
I think I learned really early to question authority, I guess you could say, like that.
yeah,
But
yeah. So from that experience, did you have any sort of, you know, revelation during that, or was it just waking up and realizing that you had almost died, that you had experienced this thing, or was there an actual kind of NDE style experience with that?
they're not necessarily. I don't have any like visions of the light. Like the last thing I kind of remember was the neurosurgeon like asking me like what if I wanted like a bubblegum flavored gas or like a strawberry flavored gas. I remember him asking
Jesus.
if I want my whole head shaved or half my head shaved. But I remember the gas. But the next moment after that was probably like one of the most frightening was it was at coming out of the surgery and opening my eyes and not being, there was so much pressure and so much blood that was kind of drained around my head that I couldn't, my face was so swollen that I couldn't even see, like everything was kind of a blur. And there was this moment of not even knowing who I was anymore, like just this consciousness of being conscious but not knowing like where I was, what happened, who I was, who were these like figures and forms around me. And I pretty much just like lost the plot in a major way, like having people having to kind of like hold me down, and I think they had to restrain me and
Oh my
inject
God.
me and then,
Jesus.
yeah. But I mean, I gotta say, I mean, pain and trauma they're great prima material for artwork. A lot of the major artists that I admire throughout my life, and you look back at their histories too, they're all pretty much, it's hard to find a brilliant artist out there that didn't have something really terrible and traumatic and life altering happen to them at some point without their journey. So I think it's just par for the course.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think it puts it all into perspective. It makes all the other suffering and failures that you can go through in life seem pretty trivial. It's the cliche of the starving, tortured artist. I think most people take that as, I'm just going to work a shitty job forever as long as I can do my art. But what you're talking about is a completely different type of torture. It's like, it doesn't make the idea of jumping off that cliff seem like nearly as big of a deal because of what you've already been through. And I think a lot of other artists, like you said, are like that. I definitely think that's a great point. And man, thank God you made it through, because now me and all these other people who you touch with your work get to experience that. And that's just so cool, man. It's amazing. And
Yeah.
it's again, give it up for Western medicine with all of its
Yeah, absolutely.
problems and institutional rot and whatever. At least it can
Yeah,
still save
yeah.
lives. I mean,
No, it's it's a win-win for everybody, and there's also an element where it's like, man, everything after that is just bonus too.
yep.
You know, like
Hmm.
this is definitely like everything after 11 were like, you know, bonus levels.
Hmm. Hmm. So on that, the original topic of like catalyzing life experiences that led you to the path you're on. So you mentioned you had kind of the artistic proclivity from a young age. Um, but along with that comes certain natural goals. Like I want to work for Disney, or I want to work for this other huge company or creative agency. And if I remember correctly, you did those things, but
Hmm.
kind of abandoned them. And that to me is kind of, from outside looking in, that looks like a moment where you sort of rejected the the typical mode of success in favor of an unknown one that's totally independent and risky.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, growing up, like I loved comic books. I wanted to be a comic book artist. There was a period where I really loved like science fiction and like scary movies. I wanted to be like a makeup effects artist. Like I had, like there were little goals that got me to this point. Then I kind of progressed and evolved beyond that. And I mean, I really always wanted to be, since in high school, I think I realized that I really wanted to be this kind of a more like a classical fine artist. And I went to an art school in Florida. And I went to school around the year, I think it was, yeah, I graduated in 96. And that was I went to this school called Ringling School of Art and Design, which is a computer animation school in Sarasota, Florida. And I only went to that school because the girl that I was in love with in high school, she moved to Florida, and the only school of any like academic merit whatsoever was a computer animation school 3 hours away in Sarasota, and so I chose that school for love, and
Mm-hmm.
it was kind of during the heyday of Silicon Graphics and Jurassic Park had just came out, and computer animation was all the rage, and so I decided like, oh, that could be an interesting thing to kind of get into. I always loved movies and those sort of things. And it was, the only real reason I actually ended up going into the field of film and, at an internship at ILM, and I went on to work for Nintendo and a couple other different companies was actually the only reason I even went into games and the kind of concept design field. One was it was really natural because it was a very natural evolution from the monsters and spaceships and creative worlds that I made when I was a child. So it felt really it was a natural fit. But the other was really more just a mercenary angle. After
Yeah.
graduating from art school, I had this like over $100,000 of student loans and debts, and working in the entertainment industry was it was the quickest and fastest way to try to just scrape my way back into my own financial sovereignty.
Yeah, man. Yeah, the student loans are just such a scourge on my
So
generation, and
it's so
it's
insidious.
terrible, man. It's terrible. I'm going through it right now, trying to settle up all that shit, and it's going to take decades most likely, unless I have some sort of breakthrough. But aside from that, you know, I think I'm a huge believer in the idea that you really are who you associate with. And you're going to have your natural talents and proclivities and ideas you're interested in, but you can really multiply your own potential by sending it through the prism of other like minded people. And I
Mhm.
think for a lot of people, that's an unbelievably transformational experience. And I know you spend a lot of your time now doing that. You go to tons of gatherings, festivals, events, whatever. And I'm curious, how did starting to do that change who you were and the kind of work you wanted to make? Because I would imagine that would have to have some sort of pretty large impact.
Yeah, well, part of my goals for, the reasons that I chose things like interning at Industrial Light and Magic, and getting out of school, I worked for a company called Interplay was my first job, and it was really, I just wanted to be around the best artist I could be around. And working at ILM, I got to meet my first mentor, who was a brilliant genius named Ian McCaig. Being surrounded by all the incredible artists at Industrial Light and Magic was such an incredibly inspiring place, and so humbling to see just talent just oozing off of all of the walls and from the minds of these amazing individuals. And went to work at Interplay to be around artists Justin Sweet and Vance Kovacs and Jason Manley and Kevin Llewellyn, who I thought were doing some of the best, kind of most cutting edge digital painting artwork at the time. And I guess, I went along that route. Ultimately, I ended up leaving Nintendo to form a company with some of my closest friends who were all kind of contemporary artists whose skills I really admired, and we just loved being around each other and learning from each other. So a lot of the entertainment stage of my art was, even though I wasn't in love with the work that I was creating, I was really in love with the people that I was able to surround myself with, and it was such a amazing way to continue my journey of education and support myself at the same time. And that track lasted, I think the beginning of the end of that stage was probably happened around 2003 when I went to my first Burning Man festival. Mm-hmm. And that was definitely another kind of like major rite of passage and line in the sand. And when I first stepped foot on the playa, there was, even though I was surrounded myself with friends and people that I admired and I'd grown up with, there was still an element of myself that was very much an outsider. There was a part of me that just didn't totally fit within kind of the 9-to-5 managing a business and showing up to work at times and people's expectations and drawing aliens and dragons was really kind of eroding what was left of my soul at that point. And my first experience on the playa, kind of wandering around, I went there all by myself, and there was one night, I think it was like a Thursday night, I wandered out into the 10 o'clock sound camp area, and within kind of a dust storm at night, I stumbled upon a camp called El Circo, and I walked into this 60-foot dome, and there inside there's this long-haired crazy DJ called Bass Nectar playing, and I found myself surrounded by this motley crew of these beautiful, ancient, future, fashionable, psychedelic vampires, for lack of a better term.
Cool. Okay.
And spinning fire and wearing like the most amazing sort of like techno future Mad Max costumes. And as soon as I saw this crew, I was just like, I just felt like I was home. Like I was like, whatever, I kind of made a decision, like whatever I need to do to be a part of this scene and to gain the friendship of these people, like I'm gonna do that, because this is where I belong. And so that was a major kind of a major cultural breakthrough for me that shifted a lot of gears.
That's so beautiful, man. That's got to be such a great feeling. Like just finally seeing, because back then, man, Burning Man was not, around the time Burning Man happens now, it's all over the internet. Like millions of people know what it is. I'm sure back then it was not quite on the same level, not quite the same level of impact. So it's probably a much more kind of feeling like you were entering a weird little secret world, like a weird little enclave of
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
there was a, there's certainly like there's a weirdness, and there's like the freak element, and there's obviously a an environment and a culture that supports all different types of mind-altering escapades. There's all those lures that are sparkly and beautiful and sexy and taboo, and there's an element of this simulated freedom, which is irresistible and addicting. But really, when I look back at that time, and especially I'd say from 2003 upwards to 2006 and seven, and obviously there's not a fall off. It continued and evolved, but during that time, especially, I think the height. I'd argue that the height was around, for myself, that I found was around 2006, 2007. There was this raw spirit and like living current of creativity that was happening. That was it was absolutely intoxicating, and you could just feel it. I mean, everybody knew that they were part of something that was special, that had never been seen in this particular iteration of reality, and we were all like co-creating this thing together. And even the people at that time, these group of people that within El Circo camp, this is where Bass Nectar was kind of birthed from, the Glitch Mob, Beats Antique, Random Rab, and these were all, and we were all buddies. We all kind of like found ourselves together and influenced each other, and we grew with each other, and we sat in ceremonies and puked our guts out with each other, and broke down together, and it was such an amazing incubator for so many overcurrents and undercurrents that have really defined a cultural standard for kind of this whole generation. And a lot of these transformational festivals like the Do Lab, like everybody kind of got their break around that time, and that's when I think this sultry amoeba of creative impulses really started to go through like a major mitosis stage and evolve into all the different current forms that it enjoys now.
The sultry amoeba. I love that. That's a good one. So that's amazing, man. You were initiated together with some people who have also become really, really successful in their given artistic niches. And again, man, this is a concept that I am obsessed with after having the experience that I've had, and it's something I've already talked about in other interviews I've done on this show, but I'm going to just keep talking about it because I can't overstress how important and how missing the elements of initiation is in our culture. It's something that we have, built institutions to replace, whether it's religion or school or whatever. You go through sort of a pseudo initiatory experience upon completion of school, let's say, or a pseudo initiation when you eat a wafer at church or something. But really, they are kind of inert versions of these undeniably important cornerstones of what it is to be a human being. I mean, you only can really understand that if you've had something like that happen to you. But living in a culture where we don't have it is just, it's very, very limiting. It's very limiting. And once you do have it, like we were saying before, the red pill, whatever, the cliche, but it doesn't make it any less true, man. It does not make it any less true. And the fact that you were able to experience it in that time, in that place with those people, I can't even imagine how life-altering that must have been.
Yeah, no, it is. It's definitely it was one of the most kind of formative environments to really. There was just so it just felt it felt limitless. at that moment. And it's just like, it's like surfing this wave where everybody's just kind of on this wave together, and it's happening around you. And like the second you question it, you kind of fall off the wave back into the water. And we were all just so immersed in it that there was really no looking back at that point. We knew we couldn't really put a name to it, but we all knew there was something that was so special that was happening, because it was like I said, it was a living current. There was something bigger it felt like it was working its way and weaving its way through all of us at that time. And it was like you couldn't really, there wasn't a word, like language doesn't really have a name for that kind of a thing. And it happens, and obviously it's happened countless times throughout history and culture, that pieces come together. And this is just one small microcosmic example of that. But yeah, I know we were all very grateful to be there at that time. Indeed.
Yeah, and those types of experiences stain you with a certain type of authenticity. And then I think that ends up coming through whatever work you do. And it's like people are getting a chance to experience that indirectly. And I think that's why people are drawn to what you do and what those people do. Because really yeah, you're all talented guys, but there's a lot of talented guys that don't ever get to that point. And I think you've somehow been able to harness those experiences in your work. And I think that's one of the things that makes you unique, and one of the things that contributes to your success. Not that my opinion matters, but that's what I see anyway. But
yeah, well, I'm certainly a product of my my success is based solely on being a product of my community. If I didn't have the community around me, if I didn't have the reflection of so many amazing people and their unbelievable encouragement and support, I never would have had the courage to be as reckless as I was with the chances that I took at the time. It was only because I only felt safe enough to leap into the unknown because I had such an amazing group of humans around me that I knew would catch me no matter how hard I fell. And I fell a lot, and there was always someone to help me up when I fell. And yeah, I'm so incredibly grateful for all of those people and all of their hands and all of their support. And I would not be the artist that I am today without that echo chamber of amazing individuals that helped shape and hone my personality into its present form.
that's so beautiful, man. And I know that is personally what I'm missing. I don't have around here. I don't have anybody that's, I have friends that support what I'm doing, but not in that way, not in the way of what you're describing. And I think that's something I really want to do this year and in the coming years is get out to more places, associate with more people who are really going through the same search that I'm going through, and just really immerse myself in it, because I think that's what you ultimately have to do. You can't stay in your own little microcosm, in your own little bubble of comfort. You have to adventure out, man. You gotta quest for it. You gotta seek for it. And when you meet the other people who are doing the same thing, I think that's the beginning of the proverbial hero's journey, to get cliche. It's I really think that's what it takes, man.
Yeah, I mean, nobody makes art in a vacuum.
So comparing those formative experiences, I remember around the first time we spoke, you had just had what seemed like a particularly transformative experience in India, if I remember that correctly. I'm curious, how do those types of experiences contrast, or do they feed into one another in your estimation?
Yeah, I think they just expand. and it just kind of gets deeper and deeper. Yeah, India was a huge turning point, going out to the Kumbh Mela, and a festival of like 30, going to 30 million people makes Burning Man look like a tailgate party at that point.
Shit.
And yeah, I think it's really, and that's what traveling. One thing that I've been very fortunate and grateful for is this path, the lifestyle that these these festivals, these international festivals, help provide, was this kind of this amazing container where I was able to, very fortunately leverage the skills that I had. That would they would get me, these skills would leverage me invitations to travel all over the world. And at every, Burning Man is one amazing, cluster and nexus of incredible and creative people. But it was a launching pad where I went off to the Boom Festival and met the Boom family, which was, as transformational as Burning Man was, to all the beautiful, amazing souls that, like, in Australia and the Rainbow Serpent festivals, to Canada, to Shambhala, and each one of these being, I was so fortunate that by being invited to these events, on the outside it's a festival that sells tickets, but more importantly, it was individual groups and communities that would invite me into their family and really kind of hold me as kind of one of their own. And it was really just the festivals were an excuse to really bond and kind of join and meet these amazing communities of people all over the world and all these different countries. And with every different pod of people I would meet, what was always really remarkable was seeing these different archetypes, these like archetypal characters that I would encounter. And I would meet one, and this one would be like, oh, you're a little bit like Paradox, but kind of like Madrone, and you're like this and like that. But they're all obviously like incredibly unique and individuals onto their own. But I would start seeing these larger like archetypes within all these individual tribes that didn't at that point have a lot of contact with each other. And it gave me an opportunity to kind of be kind of like an international cultural ambassador.
That's awesome.
And start weaving different networks and introducing different people and finding the other links. And to what formed, I have a global family, global support family of people all around the world that have been so generous in supporting me and the art that I'm making. And each one of them and the places that I've gone, they've all added into this, this deeper tapestry of creativity that I draw upon whenever I'm at that white canvas. That I carry all of those experiences with me, and each one like bleeds into the next painting.
That's so beautiful, man. That's the dream. That's like the dream, you to go on that personal quest for self-discovery and meet so many supportive people along the way. It makes me think of like playing an RPG, and you're in a new town and you don't know anybody, but then you do some things in the game, and then by the time you leave the town, you have all these friends, and then you go on to the next spot, and then eventually you go back, and it's totally different, and your work has impacted this tribe that you encounter. That's so cool.
Yeah, no, it's definitely kind of like psychedelic Dungeons and Dragons. You're your own like dungeon DMT master. So.
That's awesome. That's great. What was I just gonna say? I just had a follow up to that, and then our video game analogy completely shifted my train of thought. But anyway, man, now you've gotten to this weird kind of, if you're at a point in the game, you're at some weird high level, because you're at the level of like beaming your art on the Empire State Building in the Vatican. And that is not a level very many people get. I mean, you beamed Kali, the goddess of death and destruction, onto the Empire State Building, which, like I said, man, that's one of the trippiest things I've ever seen. You know, you're the largest city in the Western world having a gigantic reminder of their impending death on the most iconic building in the Western world almost. You know, that's crazy. And I don't think your intention, well, maybe, I don't know what your intention was. I don't want to speculate.
Well, it's, people kind of, and I realized after that, that particular experience and opportunity, I realized that a lot of people, with their definition of Kali, they seem to cut it off at the goddess of evil and destruction, but she's actually the goddess of, she's the destroyer of evil. And she's her particular gift is being the most powerful female archetype who destroys evil. Not the god. She's not the goddess of evil. She's the destroyer of evil. And yeah, with the Empire State Building, a lot that on all those jobs, that job, the Opera House, the Vatican, that all came through my relationships with an amazing company called Obscura Digital. And that was a particularly unique and interesting opportunity. Whenever those all come through, the generosity and the trust and faith of my friend Travis, who's the genius behind Obscura Digital, and he has a knack. Travis is the one guy. I'm not really much for communication and phone and email and things like that. But Travis is he's the one guy. Whenever the phone rings and Travis is on the other end, he's the one call I always pick up for sure. And it's one of those things where we had talked about it for a long time. He'd always had this vision of the Empire State Building, but it's never really real until you get the call. And he called me, and he has this mischievous knack of usually calling me at the last minute, regardless of what's going on or how much time they've had to prepare. And I got brought on that project with basically, I think by the time I got into the studio, we were going live in about 5 days.
Wow.
And so he kind of gave me like 5 days, and he's like, you're going to be doing the kind of the end finale moment of this. The project was for Racing Extinction, and he kind of told me, he's like, I want Aya. He's like, let's blast Aya on the Empire State Building. Aya is that's in reference to this ayahuasca image that I created around 2006, and it kind of evolved into what he wanted was this one. He just wanted just a powerful goddess, like Mother Earth goddess image, to be like the final moment that they see at the end of all these like National Geographics and kind of nature shots that they had projected on the building. And so it was an incredible, probably one of the most incredible sort of calls to adventures that I've ever received as an artist. And, my mind was just racing with all the different possibilities of what to create. And I ended up going down several different paths before reaching our final destination. And each one I went like every day, I'd kind of come up with a different concept. And the one thing I really love about Travis, if he doesn't like what he's seeing, he doesn't pull any punches. He's an amazing art director. And so like the first 2 or 3 days, every idea that I had got, pretty relentlessly shot down. And so with every day going by, I'm like losing more and more opportunity for what would maybe the biggest creative opportunity I ever have in my life. And so the pressure is mounting. But as we whittle away what he doesn't want, we start getting more to the core of what he wanted. And it kept kind of, what he kept kind of inferring is like every design I was doing, it was either too detailed, or the building is, the surface of the Empire State Building, it didn't really serve to have there wasn't a lot of resolution. You couldn't have a lot of detail. And it just kind of came down, he's like, I just want iconic. I want this iconic, powerful image. And it even came down, he's like, I don't even want I don't even want a face, you know, just like a black face is like just eyes. I want these eyes staring out, you know, into the darkness of New York City as the final image. And I had like, at that point, I think I had 2 days left, and I'm up for 3 days. I'm not sleeping. I'm, you know, inside I'm a wreck. I'm kind of freaking out. I'm like, okay, don't blow this, because if I can't figure anything out, they'll just cut the scene, you know, and I'll forever kind of live with that regret. And I remember just kind of going through, and I'm kind of, you know, I'm racing my mind. I'm trying to like let go of all the things I thought I was going to do. And I'm just kind of sitting there, and I was just kind of meditating, and I was just like, okay, he wants the fiercest, you know, most powerful goddess figure. And he wants these eyes staring out, and, you know, just 2 eyes on a black building is just, you know, it's just not that. I was trying to figure out how do you make that exciting. And I just kind of, you know, I think all, you know, the key to one thing I've really realized is that if there's kind of some secrets that I can try to impart to younger generations of artists, or any artist that reaches those points, I found that, you know, being able to reach this stillness point of meditation, you know, that's where, when you can kind of connect with source and creator and the, you know, the light and electric source of the universe through meditation. I just kind of meditated, and I kind of let go, and it just, in a flash, it just, you know, she just appeared to me. I was just like, wait a second, he wants these eyes staring out, and he wants this fierce goddess energy. And it, you know, this, you know, this is a kind of a great sort of like parlay back to the Kumbh Mela, and it just became obvious. It's like, well, wait a second, he wants 2 eyes. Like, I'll give him 3 eyes, and I'll give him, I know the fiercest, most powerful female goddess around. And it just came to me. It's just like, well, what's more iconic than a 3-eyed Kali with a red tongue, like looking over all of the Empire State Building, like looking over New York on the Empire State Building. And then as soon as that you know, that mental gear and that bit of inspiration came through, it was just like the floodgates just came rolling, and it all made perfect sense. And my body was just kind of like shaking with excitement. But as soon as I had that idea, I was just like the gravity of it hit me too, because I'm just here at like 3 o'clock in the morning in front of my little monitor, being like, holy shit, like what are the implications of this? Like, I could see it being real. And so my next immediate step was Skyping all of my guru and yogi friends that I had met in India, and getting their you know, their insight and their advice, and really their permission from their spiritual standpoint. Like, is this, because after feeling it was the obvious choice, the second was like, wait a second, is this appropriate? You know, like, is this going to be okay with the people that have a much closer relationship with Kali? And as soon as I got responses back from my yogis, and I reached out to one of my Naga Baba friends, and they were all just like full thumbs up, like, yes, like that is a direct yes. There was zero hesitation from anyone's part, and it just made more sense the more reflections I got from them. Because really, you know, even so, the core, the goal of the project is also like, okay, am I going to offend the racing extinction people? Like, I think this is going to be awesome, but is it appropriate? And the whole goal of racing extinction was to get people, raise awareness to this, I think the 6th mass extinction that's going on with the planet. And, you know, we can try to, you know, create more solar panels and be more sustainable and recycle more and, you know, be more responsible. But, you know, a lot of what the calls to actions for are really addressing the symptoms of the problem, but not really the causal effect. And the causal effect of the situation that we're in with the environment and the planet is really, you know, if you really want to get really as close you can to the source, it's really the darkness within our own souls. It's our disconnection. And by projecting Kali on the Empire State Building, it was essentially creating this iconic image as a prayer, and by unleashing the goddess of the destruction of evil onto the most phallic physical structure that we have, that kind of encapsulates this American dream that we have, the irony and the juxtaposition of having her on this giant lingam within the center of New York City. It just became, I couldn't think of a more appropriate and powerful statement, or groups of semblance of shapes and images that I could use this opportunity to bestow for this project. And that's how that happened.
Symbiosis complete.
Thanks for listening to part 1 of my mind meld with the lovely and talented Android Jones. In my opinion, the real meat, depth, and beauty of this conversation really still lies ahead in part 2, which should be up right now. So go dive down that rabbit hole whenever you've got a minute. As I believe I mentioned before, keep up with this thing at thirdeyedrops.com or via the Serpentine social media platform of your choice. I don't think we even got into the Serpentine social media in part 1. I think that's a part 2 Android Jones topic. Oh, and red alert! I can't believe I didn't mention this earlier. If you enjoy this thing, please take a minute to find us on iTunes and give us a review and a subscription. It truly does help, especially in the early days of a new podcast. So if you want to help get more eyes on this conversation and other great future conversations I promise to bring you guys, head on over to iTunes, give us a sweet little review and an even sweeter little subscription. Take your mom's phone. Take your brother's phone, your sister's phone, your friend's phone, your acquaintance's phone, and a stranger's phone while you're at it. And another even simpler thing you can do is just buy your cat an Apple device and sign them up with an Apple ID, buy them a phone subscription, and subscribe and review on their account, and then just return it and just cancel the phone contract. It's simple. I mean, just do that. Peace and love, my friends.
Thank you for listening.
Experience.